This is Chapter 50 of Following the Equator. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Following the Equator by Mark Twain, Chapter 50. On the road to Benares, dust and waiting, the bejeweled crowd, a native prince and his guard, Zenana lady, the extremes of fashion, the hotel at Benares, an annex a mile away, doors in India, the peepul tree, warning against cold baths, a strange fruit, description of Benares, the beginning of creation, pilgrims to Benares, a priest with a good business stand, Protestant missionary, the Trinity Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, religion the business at Benares. The man who is ostentatious of his modesty is twin to the statue that wears a fig-leaf. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. The journey to Benares was all in daylight, and occupied but a few hours. It was admirably dusty. The dust settled upon you in a thick ashy layer and turned you into a fakir, with nothing lacking to the role but the cow manure and the sense of holiness. There was a change of cars about mid-afternoon at Mogul Serai, if that was the name, and a wait of 2 hours there for the Benares train. We could have found a carriage and driven to the sacred city, but we should have lost the wait. In other countries a long wait at a station is a dull thing and tedious, but one has no right to have that feeling in India. You have the monster crowd of bejeweled natives, the stir, the bustle, the confusion, the shifting splendors of the costumes. Dear me, the delight of it, the charm of it, are beyond speech. The 2-hour wait was over too soon. Among other satisfying things to look at was a minor native prince from the backwoods somewhere, with his guard of honor, a ragged but wonderfully gaudy gang of 50 dark barbarians armed with rusty flint-lock muskets. The general show came so near to exhausting variety that one would have said that no addition to it could be conspicuous, but when this Falstaff and his motleys marched through it, one saw that that seeming impossibility had happened. We got away by and by, and soon reached the outer edge of Benares. Then there was another wait, but as usual, with something to look at. This was a cluster of little canvas boxes, palanquins. A canvas box is not much of a sight when empty, but when there is a lady in it, it is an object of interest. These boxes were grouped apart, in the full blaze of the terrible sun during the 3/4 of an hour that we tarried there. They contained Zenana ladies. They had to sit up. There was not room enough to stretch out. They probably did not mind it. They are used to the close captivity of their dwellings all their lives. When they go a journey, they are carried to the train in these boxes. In the train they have to be secluded from inspection. Many people pity them, and I always did it myself, and never charged anything. But it is doubtful if this compassion is valued. While we were in India, some good-hearted Europeans in one of the cities proposed to restrict a large park to the use of Zenana ladies, so that they could go there and in assured privacy go about unveiled and enjoy the sunshine and air as they had never enjoyed them before. The good intentions back of the proposition were recognized, and sincere thanks returned for it, but the proposition itself met with a prompt declination at the hands of those who were authorized to speak for the Zenana ladies. Apparently the idea was shocking to the ladies. Indeed, it was quite manifestly shocking. Was that proposition the equivalent of inviting European ladies to assemble scantily and scandalously clothed in the seclusion of a private park? It seemed to be about that. Without doubt, modesty is nothing less than a holy feeling, and without doubt the person whose rule of modesty has been transgressed feels the same sort of wound that he would feel if something made holy to him by his religion had suffered a desecration. I say rule of modesty, because there are about 1,000,000 rules in the world, and this makes 1,000,000 standards to be looked out for. Major Sleeman mentions the case of some high-caste veiled ladies who were profoundly scandalized when some English young ladies passed by with faces bare to the world. so scandalized that they spoke out with strong indignation, and wondered that people could be so shameless as to expose their persons like that. And yet the legs of the objectors were naked to mid-thigh. Both parties were clean-minded and irreproachably modest while abiding by their separate rules, but they couldn't have traded rules for a change without suffering considerable discomfort. All human rules are more or less idiotic, I suppose. It is best so, no doubt. The way it is now, the asylums can hold the sane people, but if we tried to shut up the insane, we should run out of building materials. You have a long drive through the outskirts of Benares before you get to the hotel, and all the aspects are melancholy. It is a vision of dusty sterility, decaying temples, crumbling tombs, broken mud walls, shabby huts. The whole region seems to ache with age and penury. It must take 10,000 years of want to produce such an aspect. We were still outside of the great native city when we reached the hotel. It was a quiet and homelike house, inviting, and manifestly comfortable, but we liked its annex better, and went thither. It was a mile away, perhaps, and stood in the midst of a large compound, and was built bungalow fashion, everything on the ground floor, and a veranda all around. They have doors in India, but I don't know why. They don't fasten, and they stand open, as a rule, with a curtain hanging in the door space to keep out the glare of the sun. Still, there is plenty of privacy, for no white person will come in without notice, of course. The native men-servants will, but they don't seem to count. They glide in, barefoot and noiseless, and are in the midst before one knows it. At first this is a shock, and sometimes it is an embarrassment, but one has to get used to it, and does. There was one tree in the compound, and a monkey lived in it. At first I was strongly interested in the tree, for I was told that it was the renowned peepul, the tree in whose shadow you cannot tell a lie. This one failed to stand the test, and I went away from it disappointed. There was a softly creaking well close by, and a couple of oxen drew water from it by the hour, superintended by two natives dressed in the usual turban and pocket-handkerchief. The tree and the well were the only scenery, and so the compound was a soothing and lonesome and satisfying place, and very restful after so many activities. There was nobody in our bungalow but ourselves. The other guests were in the next one, where the table d'hôte was furnished. A body could not be more pleasantly situated. Each room had the customary bath attached, a room 10 or 12 feet square, with a roomy stone-paved pit in it, and abundance of water. One could not easily improve upon this arrangement, except by furnishing it with cold water and excluding the hot, in deference to the fervency of the climate. But that is forbidden. It would damage the bather's health. The stranger is warned against taking cold baths in India, but even the most intelligent strangers are fools, and they do not obey, and so they presently get laid up. I was the most intelligent fool that passed through that year, but I am still more intelligent now that it is too late. I wonder if the dorian, if that is the name of it, is another superstition like the peepul tree. There was a great abundance and variety of tropical fruits, but the dorian was never in evidence. It was never the season for the dorian. It was always going to arrive from Burma some time or other, but it never did. By all accounts it was a most strange fruit, and incomparably delicious to the taste, but not to the smell. Its rind was said to exude a stench of so atrocious a nature that when a dorian was in the room even the presence of a polecat was a refreshment. We found many who had eaten the dorian, and they all spoke of it with a sort of rapture. They said that if you could hold your nose until the fruit was in your mouth, a sacred joy would suffuse you from head to foot that would make you oblivious to the smell of the rind, but that if your grip slipped and you caught the smell of the rind before the fruit was in your mouth, you would faint. There is a fortune in that rind. Some day somebody will import it into Europe and sell it for cheese. Benares was not a disappointment. It justified its reputation as a curiosity. It is on high ground, and overhangs a grand curve of the Ganges. It is a vast massive building, compactly crusting a hill, and is cloven in all directions by an intricate confusion of cracks which stand for streets. Tall, slim minarets and beflagged temple spires rise out of it and give it picturesqueness, viewed from the river. The city is as busy as an ant-hill, and the hurly-burly of human life swarming along the web of narrow streets reminds one of the ants. The sacred cow swarms along, too, and goes whither she pleases, and takes toll of the grain shops, and is very much in the way, and is a good deal of a nuisance, since she must not be molested. Benares is older than history, older than tradition, older even than legend, and looks twice as old as all of them put together. From a Hindu statement quoted in Rev. Mr. Parker's compact and lucid Guide to Benares, I find that the site of the town was the beginning place of the creation. It was merely an upright lingam, at first, no larger than a stovepipe, and stood in the midst of a shoreless ocean. This was the work of the god Vishnu. Later he spread the lingam out till its surface was 10 miles across. Still it was not large enough for the business, therefore he presently built the globe around it. Benares is thus the center of the earth. This is considered an advantage. It has had a tumultuous history, both materially and spiritually. It started Brahmanically many ages ago. Then by and by Buddha came in recent times, 2,500 years ago, and after that it was Buddhist during many centuries, 12 perhaps, but the Brahmins got the upper hand again then, and have held it ever since. It is unspeakably sacred in Hindu eyes, and is as unsanitary as it is sacred, and smells like the rind of the dorian. It is the headquarters of the Brahmin faith, and 1/8 of the population are priests of that church. But it is not an overstock, for they have all India as a prey. All India flocks thither on pilgrimage, and pours its savings into the pockets of the priests in a generous stream which never fails. A priest with a good stand on the shore of the Ganges is much better off than the sweeper of the best crossing in London. A good stand is worth a world of money. The holy proprietor of it sits under his grand spectacular umbrella and blesses people all his life, and collects his commission, and grows fat and rich, and the stand passes from father to son, down and down and down through the ages, and remains a permanent and lucrative estate in the family. As Mr. Parker suggests, it can become a subject of dispute at one time or another, and then the matter will be settled, not by prayer and fasting and consultations with Vishnu, but by the intervention of a much more puissant power, an English court. In Bombay I was told by an American missionary that in India there are 640 Protestant missionaries at work. At first it seemed an immense force, but of course that was a thoughtless idea. One missionary to 500,000 natives. No, that is not a force. It is the reverse of it. 640 marching against an entrenched camp of 300,000,000, the odds are too great. A force of 640 in Benares alone would have its hands overfull with 8,000 Brahmin priests for adversary. Missionaries need to be well equipped with hope and confidence, and this equipment they seem to have always had in all parts of the world. Mr. Parker has it. It enables him to get a favorable outlook out of statistics which might add up differently with other mathematicians. For instance, during the past few years competent observers declare that the number of pilgrims to Benares has increased. And then he adds up this fact and gets this conclusion: but the revival, if so it may be called, has in it the marks of death. It is a spasmodic struggle before dissolution. In this world we have seen the Roman Catholic power dying upon these same terms for many centuries. Many a time we have gotten all ready for the funeral and found it postponed again on account of the weather or something. Taught by experience, we ought not to put on our things for this Brahminical one till we see the procession move. Apparently one of the most uncertain things in the world is the funeral of a religion. I should have been glad to acquire some sort of idea of Hindu theology, But the difficulties were too great, the matter was too intricate, even the mere ABC of it is baffling. There is a trinity, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, independent powers apparently, though one cannot feel quite sure of that, because in one of the temples there is an image where an attempt has been made to concentrate the three in one person. The three have other names, and plenty of them, and this makes confusion in one's mind. The three have wives, and the wives have several names, and this increases the confusion. There are children. The children have many names, and thus the confusion goes on and on. It is not worth while to try to get any grip upon the cloud of minor gods. There are too many of them. It is even a justifiable economy to leave Brahma, the chiefest god of all, out of your studies, for he seems to cut no great figure in India. The vast bulk of the national worship is lavished upon Shiva and Vishnu and their families. Shiva's symbol, the lingam with which Vishnu began the creation, is worshipped by everybody apparently. It is the commonest object in Benares. It is on view everywhere. It is garlanded with flowers, offerings are made to it, it suffers no neglect. Commonly it is an upright stone, shaped like a thimble, sometimes like an elongated thimble. This Priapus worship, then, is older than history. Mr. Parker says that the lingams in Benares outnumber the inhabitants. In Benares there are many Mohammedan mosques. There are Hindu temples without number. These quaintly shaped and elaborately sculptured little stone jugs crowd all the lanes. The Ganges itself and every individual drop of water in it are temples. Religion, then, is the business of Benares, just as gold production is the business of Johannesburg. Other industries count for nothing as compared with the vast and all-absorbing rush and drive and boom of the town's specialty. Benares is the sacredest of sacred cities. The moment you step across the sharply defined line which separates it from the rest of the globe, you stand upon ineffably and unspeakably holy ground. Mr. Parker says, "It is impossible to convey any adequate idea of the intense feelings of veneration and affection with which the pious Hindu regards holy Kashi (Benares), and then he gives you this vivid and moving picture. Let a Hindu regiment be marched through the district, and as soon as they cross the line and enter the limits of the holy place, they rend the air with cries of Kashi ji ki jai, jai! Holy Kashi, hail to thee, hail, hail, hail! The weary pilgrim, scarcely able to stand, with age and weakness, blinded by the dust and heat, and almost dead with fatigue, crawls out of the oven-like railway carriage, and as soon as his feet touch the ground he lifts up his withered hands and utters the same pious exclamation. Let a European in some distant city, in casual talk in the bazaar, mention the fact that he has lived at Benares, and at once voices will be raised to call down blessings on his head, for a dweller in Benares is of all men most blessed." It makes our own religious enthusiasm seem pale and cold. Inasmuch as the life of religion is in the heart, not the head, Mr. Parker's touching picture seems to promise a sort of indefinite postponement of that funeral. End of chapter 50.